Okay, we're at day 4 of writing Prophet and Pilgrim Voyages in the World Shattered by God. I decided to change that from adventures to kind of lean in a little bit into the thematic connections to, the Voyages of Sinbad kind of a thing. So what did I get done yesterday? I created world map, at least the first basic one. The numbers are labeling so that I didn't have to try to cram half legible text of what the island names are, especially since some of the islands are a bit too small for that. And I did throw in the names though over the seas and stuff. The version that's going to be in the book is going to be in black and white though, because I'm going to try to keep this a black and white book with no color art on the inside. We'll see how that goes. It depends on how legible, because everything being turned into slightly different shades of gray. Sometimes, like the Ageless Sea right here is a little bit hard to read. Same thing with Thousand Islands Sea down here. But we got, the northern continent and the southern continent at opposite ends, and then the middle continent, which was shattered into these rather huge islands. I mean, we're not talking like Hawaii. I mean, like down here in the corner, we get that amount of distance right there from here to the edge is about 500 miles. And so, like, these are all like little micro-continents in themselves. But, as I say, we got like Iran, Pakistan over here. We have Turkey, Anatolia, Azerbaijan, kind of areas on this island. This is basically Greece and the Aegean Sea, the Arabian Peninsula, and part of Iraq, Mesopotamia. It'll be like a kingdom around this little river, kind of like the Tigris and Euphrates. Over here we have, Israel, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, all as one little island, the Holy Land. Here we got Indonesia as its own little cluster. And this was Northeast Africa, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, and maybe the tip of the horn of Somalia in there. And then we have the other end of the Sahara, where you got, a chunk of Algeria's deserts and Morocco. And then over here we have Spain, which would be currently split in half. The northern half controlled by the humans, the southern half controlled by the remnant empire of giants that's now currently controlled by the Cyclops since the Titans were wiped out. And then we got the British Isles in the corner. There's a lot of like mixture of I guess you'd say like Greek myth underlaying kind of an Arabian Nights kind of mythology with a little twist of Tolkien, since I'm having orcs being aligned with the humans instead of the elves being aligned with humans. The elves are part of one of the two bad guy groups. So kind of a nod at how like the Haradrim, were fighting for Sauron kind of thing, but like turned on its head in a couple different ways. Here and there, as I go along through this, obviously I have neither the time or money to have read every last fucking book ever written for the fantasy genre, novel or role-playing game. And so occasionally I'm sure there's going to be some convergent evolution on names, but if anything I mention in any of these videos happens to stand out as, oh, someone else has already had a thing in their game called the Thane Law, let me know so I can go ahead and change that before this gets any deeper. But anyway, so like I said, got a map done. Back over to the book. Table of contents is still as is. I'm almost done with the introductory chapter, and then after that there'll be a section where luckily I can copy paste a lot of stuff out of Blooded Gnome in terms of the rules and stuff, and then make little adjustments for flavor text as I go. So that'll save a lot of time in the end, so I can focus mostly on the rather large amount of setting information that I've kind of set myself up to have to write out here. You're going to have a very, very fleshed out setting with a lot of world building, but in that way where I don't give you so much like specific lore about every last year of the 1,000 years and every town and hamlet of every single island. There'll be plenty of room for game masters to invent and build their own stuff within the setting. I do like to paint in broad strokes. I'm just going to give you an awful lot of broad strokes here. So you kind of have like at least some basis of framework to create an adventure pretty much anywhere on the map characters might find themselves. Doing this thing where I'm going to probably at least start off the chapters or various parts of the book where it feels appropriate where I'm taking quotes out of this book here, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and by basically framing by, since it's a quote from the Prophet, it implies that this is a quote from the Prophet character within the game's backstory, who lived 800 years ago and overthrew the Titans by revealing that they were false gods and turning everyone, like, well, not everyone, but all the races allied to humans returned to a monotheistic religion at that point. He was the first cleric, and all the clerics in the setting are followers of the Prophet. But, so, you know, some brief intro text. Here's what the setting's about. Here's what this game is. Here's the basic world map and world map key. And then I give some introductory blurbs on what the major playable races are for players to choose from for their characters. And then the same for the classes that are primarily presented as player character classes. There will be some stuff where later in the book there'll be a chapter for alternative characters, because there's a few other races that could potentially be playable depending on, you know, what the game master wants to do with all this and allow for his players. And there will be a couple barbarian classes that are not included in the core set, because the core races and classes are basically the all the stuff tied to the humans' monotheistic civilization. But, you know, conceivably characters could be allied to the Thane Law or to the Empire of Giants. I mean, it just kind of depends on what you want to do with it. Or you can have a lot of back and forth, or a combined party of characters that are drawn from, you know, all potential sources. It's up to you, mate. And then a little section just to kind of like help us, you know, anchor a bit more of what the world is like. I talk about the 7 cities that pilgrims are expected to go to, because the Prophet had lived in them briefly at one point or another during his career, as he was, you know, going about the world trying to rally everyone together to overthrow the Titans. And I was going to start the section just giving a brief overview of what the 2 major bad guy factions are, and then I'll move on to the character creation section, which, as I've stated, is largely written. I will have to come up with stat blocks for 5 different races that I'm adding into this that there was not a version of in Blood and Gnome, and actually the same amount of classes too. Now, the rules and stats for various races in this game and certain classes will be identical to that in Blood and Gnome, but this is distinctly a different world. It's not the past of Blood and Gnome, it's not the future in Blood and Gnome, completely unrelated settings to each other. Just like how you see in various D&D settings that all cue off the same version of a D&D back in the day and stuff like that. You know, so, you know, elves might get the same stat boosts in both worlds, but that they're not the same elves, if you catch my meaning. Which, if you're an experienced person with role-playing games, I shouldn't have to describe to you, actually, so I'm probably wasting your time talking about it. But I'm gonna, like, you know, it's kind of fun kind of combining, like, biblical and Islamic mythology together in a few ways. One of the things I'm having it set up is that the Prophet was born to the Minotaurs, but he always knew that humans would end up being his primary followers, right? And in modern times, humans in their artwork will depict the Prophet as a human born to Minotaur parents, kind of as a nod to the idea of white Jesus or Filipino Jesus. And then there's things where, like, some of the other races kind of just don't get that. Halflings find it weird, orcs find it weird. Minotaurs don't really give a fuck, because they don't, like, buy into the Prophet's mythos in the same way as the other races do, which is also something that the Prophet understood about his own people and predicted would be the case. They still cling to their, you know, religion of worshiping the Bull of Heaven, which predates but is related to the Caliphate of God religion run by the Prophet's clerical order, which is kind of like the common glue that holds, which is really just an alliance of a bunch of semi-independent sultanates that share common laws and language and stuff like that, thanks to the presence of the clerical order. But it's not really like an empire or a caliphate in the sense that there's a living emperor or living caliph in control of it all. They symbolically make God the caliph of the Caliphate of God, you know, hence its name. But anyway, that's what I got so far, and I guess I'll be finishing up the rest of the introductory chapter at some point over the course of the rest of this day, hopefully, fingers crossed. So, until next time, if you want to support the channel, feel free to follow links in the description box below. Get yourself a book on PDF, or if you want a physical copy of it, you can look them up by title on Amazon.com and get yourself a print-on-demand version. Hit like and subscribe and comment and all those other good things that you've been told by millions of YouTube videos by now in the course of your YouTube viewing careers. And stay waspinated.